in the dark, a single candle burning on the Jimmy cake. "Oh, look who's back," Jana said, her voice cold. "The world traveler." "Jana, listen," Jack began, but the words wouldn't come. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He had managed to stop at the pawn shop just before they closed, using the $50 Stanley had handed him in a fit of rage earlier that evening. Jana opened the box. Her eyes filled with tears as the silver cameo caught the candlelight. "Jack, you bought it back. Happy birthday, Jana," Jack said softly. "I'm sorry I'm a fink." The moment was interrupted by another knock. Stanley Roper stood in the hallway, looking sheepish. Tripper, can I talk to you?" "I'm packing, Mr. Roper," Jack said defiantly. No. Stay. Karen told me everything. She said you, showed no interest in her at all. Said you were a perfect gentleman. In fact, she thinks she's over the hill because of you." Stanley sighed. "I told her a little fairy story to make her feel better. You're a good lad, Jack. A weird lad, but a good one." As the Ropers left, the trio sat around the cake. "So," Jana said, pinning the cameo to her blouse, "how was the date?" Jack looked at the Jimmy cake and smiled. The Radiator was more exciting. Chapter 4, The Sleepwalker and the Stray. Life in Santa Monica was never quiet for long. A few weeks after the birthday debacle, a new crisis arrived in the form of a four-legged fluff ball. Jack had returned from a visit to his friend Honest Larry, the used car salesman whose name was perhaps the greatest work of fiction in the 20th century. "Look what I got," Jack announced, lifting a tiny, whimpering puppy from his jacket. Chrissy squealed with delight. "Oh, Jack, it's adorable. Can we keep him?" Jana, ever the voice of reason, crossed her arms. "Jack, you know the rules. Roper's lease explicitly says no pets, no babies, no fun." But Larry was going to put him to sleep, Jack argued, holding the puppy up so its big brown eyes met Jeanette's. Jeanette groaned. "That's a Larry special. He told you that so you'd take the dog off his hands." "It worked," Jack admitted. That night, the apartment was filled with the sound of muffled whimpers and the scratching of tiny paws. But as the clock struck 3 o'clock a.m., a different sound echoed through the hallway. Chrissy Snow was walking. Her eyes were open, but they were vacant, staring at a world only she could see. She was sleepwalking, a habit she had picked up as a minister's daughter whenever she was under stress. This week, her boss, Mr. Rogers, affectionately known as Christopher Columbus because of his tendency to explore with his hands, was driving her crazy. Chrissy wandered out of her room, past the sleeping puppy, and straight toward the front door. Downstairs, Stanley Roper was wide awake. He was looking out his window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the weather, or perhaps the blonde in 107. Instead, he saw a vision in a white nightgown wandering across the lawn. Helen, wake up," Stanley hissed. The snow girl is walking around half naked again. Helen didn't move. Tell her to get a sweater, Stanley. I'm sleeping. The next morning, the apartment was a wreck. Jack and Jonna found Chrissy in the kitchen, blissfully unaware of her midnight excursion. Chrissy, you went outside last night, Jonna said, handing her a cup of coffee. I did. Oh dear. It must be Mr. Rogers. He dictates so fast, with his hands. We have a bigger problem, Jack said, pointing to the empty box in the corner. The puppy is gone. Panic ensued. They searched the closets, the bathroom, even the oven. Finally, a knock at the door revealed a beaming Helen Roper holding the puppy. Look what I found on my doorstep, Helen cried. Stanley thinks he left it there as an anniversary present. He's so forgetful. Poor dear. Jack, Jonna, and Chrissy exchanged terrified looks. If Stanley found out the dog came from them, they were finished. Oh, wow, Jack said, his voice cracking. What a great gift. The day became a comedy of errors. Jack had made a special French dish beef bourguignon, which was actually high-end dog food, mixed with gravy, a desperate attempt to hide the pup's supplies. In a moment of madness, the dish ended up on the Ropers' dinner table. Jack burst into the Ropers' apartment just as Stanley was about to take a bite. Mr. Roper, stop! Jack screamed, grabbing the plate and dumping it into the sink. Tripper, are you crazy? That was my gourmet dinner. It was cold. Jack lied. I couldn't let a man of your stature eat cold bourguignon. In the end, the puppy stayed with the Ropers. Stanley, convinced he had masterfully surprised his wife with a gift he didn't remember buying, felt like a king. Helen had a new companion. And the trio in 201 had their lease and their sanity intact. For now. Chapter 5. The Case of the Vanishing Rent. The month was coming to an end, and in the world of apartment 201, that meant the rent scramble. $300 was the magic number, an astronomical sum for a student, a florist, and a secretary in 1977. I've got my 100, Jonna said, placing a stack of tens on the shelf. Me too, Chrissy added, placing her share in a white envelope marked rent. Jack patted his pockets. I'm 10 short, but I'll have it by tonight. I'm doing a catering gig for a library. Very quiet, very lucrative. But when Jack and Jonna returned from their day, the apartment felt different. The front door was unlocked. Chrissy? Jonna called out. Are you home? Silence. They checked the shelf. The white envelope was gone. The money. Jonna gasped. Jack, we've been robbed. They paced the apartment, checking for signs of a struggle. Nothing was missing except the envelope and an old transistor radio. Maybe it's a professional job, Jack suggested, grabbing a rolling pin from the kitchen. They took the cash and the electronics. I'll call the police. Minutes later, a weary-looking officer arrived. He listened to their story with a look of profound boredom. So, you left $300 in an envelope marked rent on an open shelf and the door was unlocked. The officer asked, "Well, yes, Jana